Hey everyone, Gary Simon of Corsetro. So today we have a bit of a different type of topic for this channel. Just last week I did a real quick video tutorial on using animated mock-up templates in Photoshop, and some of you expressed interest in learning how to create your own mock-up templates in Photoshop so that you can potentially make money selling them or offering them for free in exchange for an email, whatever. There's a lot of ways to actually make a business out of it. So what I'm going to do is show you how to make this t-shirt mock-up template where people can open it up in Photoshop real quickly, double click on a smart object layer, and place in their artwork, whether it be a logo, some type of graphic design, illustration, whatever. And then it will automatically make it look like it's actually on this t-shirt here, for instance. Now, of course, everything I'm showing you, you can replicate the same process for any other type of medium, whether it be office stationery for an identity mock-up template, a poster, boxes, coffee mugs. I mean, basically, I'm just going to give you all the tools you need to understand how you can really make these robust, realistic, customizable smart templates here in Photoshop. So I'm going to be using this camera. It's a Panasonic Lumix G7 with a stock camera. I'm definitely not a photographer by any stretch. This camera body, though, I think it was like, by the time when I bought it a couple years ago, it was like $500. And then the lenses, I forget how much it was in total, but they're relatively cheap. But you know what? You could probably even get away with these days using your smartphone if you have one of the newer ones with the 4K resolution and all that stuff. So I'm going to real quickly show you using this camera. I'm going to record myself talking about laying this what do you call this shirt right here on my messy floor, and we're going to take a picture and then we'll edit it. All right, so make sure you subscribe here if you haven't yet, and let's get started.
All right, guys, what's up? So here's this shirt that I have. It's just a white long sleeve shirt with an interesting material on it. Let me get up close. Maybe you can see. Yeah, there we go. So I've just laid it out here on my kind of messy floor, and basically the goal here is to get it set up properly. So I've kind of just moved it into place. We could really see there's a lot of shadows here because of the folds. That can be worked out in Photoshop. By the way, my mic here, I'm just using the onboard camera mic, so it sucks because I'm holding this. And so there's probably a little bit too many folds. You don't want too many, but at the same time, you don't want it to be flat either, because this makes it look obviously a lot more authentic and realistic. So I may just try to pull a little bit in certain areas. All right, so the middle part is, I think we're good to go right there. So I'm just going to snap a few pictures of this, and then we'll choose in Photoshop and cut it out. Forget the background of this floor that needs vacuumed. I don't blame my kids. All right, so let's do that.
All right, so I snapped like 13 different photos. Now I'm going to, we're going to take a look at all of them to identify the one that we want to use most. So here we are, we have this, I did like a perspective one on a few of them. Let's go ahead. That was 1.jpg, or here's 2. Here's the second one, which is kind of just like a forward one. And I'm just looking at the shadows. Get out of there. There we go. Just looking at the shadows and just how, if I see one that really sticks out to me that I like, I'll choose it. This one is a little strange looking. Like I don't know, this person must not lift weights or something. Yeah, you got to do those bicep curls, dude. And again, I'm just kind of getting different perspectives, changing up the creases. I kind of like this one. This one's kind of strange, like saggy boobs over here or something. Or he had a stroke. I don't like this one. I think I do like 10. That's the one that I'm going to go with. And it has this kind of big crease right here. And that's going to allow us to do some cool stuff to the smart object layer with the Liquify tool. And you'll see how that works. So that's the one we're going to use. I'm going to make these available for you to use as well, so you guys can follow right along. Just look at the description here on YouTube. So here's our 10.jpg, and this is now for this next step. There's no particular must-do order. You can do these in different orders here, but the thing I'm going to focus on first here is cutting this out of the background. Now, when it comes to cutting stuff out of Photoshop from the backgrounds and isolating them, it gives you a lot of tools, fortunately. I suggest definitely make sure that you, if you're taking a picture, whether it be a t-shirt like we did, or a coffee mug or whatever, use a higher contrast background. It makes your life easier when it comes to cutting stuff out of the background. So what we're going to do is a good candidate or good tool for cutting this out, because this background isn't completely flat. If we try to take the quick selection tool, or the magic wand tool rather, that's going to happen. That's no good. So what we're going to do is take the magnetic lasso tool, because we could still see a high contrast between the background of the shirt and the actual background, the color of the shirt. So to get started, make sure first that you have everything in view that you want to cut out. Make sure you're not in this type of situation, because moving around with this magnetic lasso tool, as I just discovered, is a pain. I had to restart the damn video. So you just left click and you go along the edge as close as you can within reason, but you can go pretty quick. And it does a pretty good job of automatically adding what look to be anchor points, like from a pen tool, around the edge, or right in the center of that high contrast area. So just keep going, keep going. Just reminded myself from the Dory. Let's see here. Keep going. I kind of didn't get the very edge of that sleeve in the shot, but that's okay. Not a big deal. All right, keep going. Almost there. Sorry, this is a little bit boring. I'm too lazy to speed up the video probably too. I'll probably forget as well. All right, so once you get to the very beginning and you have the whole thing cut out, it's going to automatically create a selection out of this shirt that we want. So what we can do now is, if we come right down here at the very bottom, we can create like a solid color out of this section. Well, we don't really want to do that. We kind of want to invert this instead. So what we can do, by the way, let's get rid of that, instead is hit Control Shift and I. That will invert the selection. You can also access that up here from Select and Inverse. That's the same thing, Control Shift I. Then you can go ahead and do that same thing to create a solid color background. All right, so now this gives you the option of easily changing the background color. So I'm going to leave it right around this just very desaturated mid blue right there. Of course, this isn't perfect. For instance, we need this little section down here cut out. So how would we do that? Well, we could see this new type of layer that was created, and we have this mask over here, and this works if you select it. You have a white, any area that has white in it is going to be visible, and any area that has black is not going to be visible. So that's the shirt itself. We need this part here to be white. All right, so you could do that through any number of ways. You could take a brush tool, and notice even though we have white selected as the foreground, which is what you definitely want to do, you'll see we're seeing the background still and not the actual color of white. And you have to make sure you have this selected over here, this mask. But a better way of doing this would be to either use that magnetic lasso tool to create a selection out of it, or just use like a pen tool in path mode. So if you take the pen tool, make sure it's at path mode up here instead of shape, and just create a Bezier curve around it. So you're left clicking and dragging to match the area that you want to cut out. Once you have it all the way back to the initial anchor point, right click, make selection. Make sure we have it set it on these settings, no feather radius. Hit OK, and then we can simply go to Edit and Fill with the foreground color as the contents, and there we go. All right, now you're going to notice that some of these areas that we have some dark edges that are showing up from the high contrast background that it was on. And if you want to allow people, of course, to change the background of this template. Maybe if they want to use a real light one, that's going to stick out. It's going to look kind of crappy. So there's a way to fix this, though. And what we can do is we'll go ahead and let's see here. We're going to hit Control and left click on here, and that's on the actual the layer mask here. And that will create a selection out of everything that we see in the background. So What we want to do though is we want to invert that. So Control Shift I once again, or select inverse. And now we have just the shirt area selected. What we need to do is go to select and modify, and we want to contract it. So this is going to shrink it inwards. And we'll say by 3 pixels or so. We don't want to do, if it's just 1 pixel, it won't get everything. 3 pixels should get all of the black stuff, almost all of it out. So we'll hit OK. And then now we can see that it shrunk in. So if I zoom up, it's going to cut off some of this part, but not enough to where it's noticeable. And so now what we'll do is Control Shift I once again. So we're selecting the inverse. Then we could just take the paint bucket tool, or we can just go to, make sure we have white selected for our foreground. We can go to, with this selected right there, edit fill, hit OK. And now those edges have gone away. Awesome, awesome stuff. All right, so now the background is pretty much done, although, you know, we could make it so that we have kind of like a gradient coming by on the upper left corner. I think we'll save that for the end if I can remember to do it. So, well, let's rename this real quick to background. All right, so people know if they want to change the background of the shirt, they can. Let's also go ahead and let's do the main fun part, which is going to be creating the smart object and actually getting a logo in here and making adjustments for it to look realistic. So the first thing we want to do is kind of define, okay, what portion of the shirt or how large do we want, you know, them to be able to place in a logo. So this part really requires, you know, if you're doing this for a really specific purpose where you're showing a client what their design looks like on a shirt, then it's really important that you know who the printers are, you know what area of the shirt that they can actually print on so that you can give an accurate representation. If you don't really care about that and you want people to have a full design shirt or whatever, go ahead and do that if you want to. But for me, we're just going to keep it simple, just somewhere here like a rectangle in this type of size, I guess you could say. So what I'll do is take the rectangle tool and left click and drag just an area that I'm eyeballing that I think it would be okay to have a actual design. Now, of course, at this point, it's obviously not in line, it's not rotated yet, but we don't want it to be rotated. What we're going to do at this point is right click, and we're going to convert to a smart object. All right, right there. All right, so now it's a smart object, which means if we double click on it, we now have access to this area where this is where the artwork would actually be placed. But I'm not going to do that just yet. I'm just going to Control T now and rotate it. There is a slight angle, like kind of a slight perspective because I was standing back from it a little bit. So if you need to really place this on an angle, like for instance, if you're looking at a box or something from the side like I was, you would really have a big angle. You can right click and you can choose skew, perspective, distort, or warp to really change the perspective of this. So I'm just going to choose distort, and it just lets you very slightly modify each corner, kind of like that. In this case, it almost looks like we're on, there's not much of a perspective, so you don't want to do anything too much or too drastic. And then just select the move tool, hit place. All right, so now at this point, we can go in and we can put in a logo. So let's go ahead. I have just some logos I grabbed from Google Images. I'm going to just go back to our smart object, or just double click here. By the way, let's go put your artwork here. Just double click to rename that. We'll get there, and then we'll go ahead and I'm going to place in a logo that I just found on Google Images here. Now what I'm going to need to do is right click here, because when you drag in something from your desktop or from somewhere else in the computer, it's going to automatically create a smart object out of it. So we're just going to rasterize the layer first. That'll allow me to get rid of this background that was part of it. And then I'm also going to hide this rectangle one. So now we just have a fully transparent area with a logo, and we're going to hit save, Control S. And there we go. Now, yes, it's in the correct orientation of the shirt, but it doesn't exactly look very realistic. And there's several things that you can do to make it look like it's actually a part of the shirt. And you can really see this if you come up, because you can see solid areas. Normally with this type of fabric, you would see the actual fabric as well. And the way we can do that is through blend modes. So with this, your artwork here selected, we can select it, use the keyboard down arrow key, and start going through these. And the very first one that I noticed that looks like it makes the most sense is multiply, because we can see just enough of that fabric to where it's believable, but still see most of the logo and the original color. So I'm going to leave it on multiply. Now, because there are folds in this, we want the actual logo to look as though it actually has folds in it, right? And so the way we can do this in a non-destructive manner, because this is a smart object, not a rastered layer, is we can go to Filter, Liquify. Now this is going to show up, it's showing up on my other screen, so it's this massive 4K resolution kind of screen. But let me go ahead and scale things down here. If I double click it, unfortunately, it's not allowing me to maximize it, but that's okay. So right here we have just that the layer that's selected, the smart object layer. And if you want to see the background, you come down here under the settings and just put in, let's see where it's at. It's not face liquify. We don't want that. We have our show backdrop. This is checked, but the opacity has to be up. So now all of a sudden we can see what's happening in the background. And we have over here these tools like the forward warp tool. We have a reconstruct tool. We have a smooth tool, a pucker tool, and a bloat tool. For us, it makes sense to probably use the forward warp tool. And the way this works is if I click on this, we can see that it starts to affect the image here quite a bit. So we can see right here there's this big sort of crease that's going on. So let's go ahead and we'll take the size down to match this a little bit more, maybe up. Let's take the density down. Let's try 110. There we go. It's a little bit better. Maybe we'll do 90. All right. And then you'll see how you need to adjust these values for density and pressure based on how it's being affected. So sometimes if you left click, it says the backtrack settings are preventing the preview from showing image changes. Okay, so we need to come back down here and take this opacity down. So now we could see it's slightly up here. And if we do that much, way too much, obviously. So we need to take the pressure down so that when you left click and drag, it's not going to affect as much. Even 55 is too much. So we'll go back down to 30. I'm just kind of left clicking and letting go. And if we come back down here and show, oops, well, I messed this up. Let's see, background. There we go. There we go. We could see how this affected it. And so I may do a couple other areas, just very slightly. I'm just looking at the areas where there's some creases. Maybe that. Maybe that. I'm just barely even touching these things. Push this out. And there you go. You don't want to do it too much, of course. And you can do corrections. You can push things back, or you can also do the reconstruct tool. All right. I think that looks pretty good. And it looks like it's following that area pretty good. So I'm going to hit OK. And this is now what it looks like. And it looks pretty realistic to me now that we have that warp tool on it. All right, awesome. So now we can even see that if we go back to our smart object, let's try putting in an entirely different logo here. So let's go ahead and I'm going to drag in a different one. right. Get rid of this. Right click, rasterize. I'm going to get rid of that white part. Although because we have it on multiply, you're not going to see the white part anyhow. So let's save this. Yeah, there you go. And it looks fairly realistic. Now, because this part was bigger and it came out to the side more as opposed to this one, notice how it's in a little bit more. I didn't use that liquify part. So this liquify, it's non-destructive. So if we double click it, we're going to get it back and we'll be able to see now areas where we should probably affect it even further out. All right, so if I use this tool, oops, let me zoom in. I'm using Alt and my mouse scroll wheel. All right, so let's hit OK. And there we go. Now it's a little bit more believable. Awesome. We'll try one more just for the fun of it. We're not done yet, though. Some tattoo logo thing here. I'll just hit save. And look at that. Awesome, awesome stuff. All right, so we're not done yet. Let's go ahead and we'll bring that one back. All right, so let's make this a little bit wider, the canvas. So we're going to go to Image, Canvas Size. And for the width, let's go to Pixels. We'll make it like 3,400. All right, so now for the background, we select the layer mask portion and we make those other edges white here. All right, that's looking better. Now, what about shadows? Because if we look at the original background, we'll see it has shadows that are being casted mainly from this way. It's looking like it's kind of going up. So yeah, because you can see the shadows up here. So we bring this back. The way we can get a shadow here is just a little bit of working with the selection tools. So what we'll do is we'll select this. That's Control left click on the layer mask. And then we're going to Control Shift I to just create a selection of this shirt itself. I'm going to create a new layer, Control Shift N, and hit Enter. And we'll just make it white. All right, so now we just have this white thing. We double click it. On the right side of the layer, we're going to get our layer styles, and we'll add a drop shadow. So we'll choose drop shadow, and we'll make it come up from this direction. And that's pretty much close to what it looked like. Of course, it wasn't this dark, but we'll fix that in a second. We have our blend mode normal. That's fine. The distance is about 24, spread 6, and size is 70. So let's hit OK. And let's also, assuming we're happy with this shadow, we're going to right click and rasterize the layer style. Now, we're going to go ahead and go back here and just take the selection of the layer mask. So Control left click, and we'll go ahead and Control Shift I to invert the selection once again. We'll select our layer 1 shadow layer and just delete the actual white fill that we made. So now we have this. This is way too harsh of a shadow, so we'll take the opacity down right around 46%, and look at that. Now that looks good. Now it's not perfect though, because there's some areas, like if we look at the original, there's no shadow at all. The parts where the shirt was like right on the floor, naturally, there's not going to be as many shadows. There's also more shadow right here as opposed to this section because this was up off the floor more, casting more shadows. There's not much shadows over here, though there's hardly any shadows here, but it's too consistent to be believable. So what we can do is just take the eraser tool and get a good size and make sure it's feathered so the hardness is 0%. And you can also make the opacity like 54% so that when you left click for the first time, it's not going to get rid of everything. So like right down here, we get rid of that. That's a little bit more believable. Kind of like that. Down here, there was no shadow practically. And so these minor adjustments are just going to make it look a little bit more believable. Yeah, kind of like that. And then just have fun with it. And there we go. Sweet. All right, so we're not done yet. The actual shirt itself may need some adjustment in terms of color, and we can apply adjustment layers to this, although right off the bat, I'm not really sure if I want any color in it, because actually, even though it's white, there's color that's showing up. So if we select it, for instance, and we go and add an adjustment layer. So if we go to Window, Adjustments, we have all these different adjustments that we can apply to it in a non-destructive manner. So if we go to, let's move this out of the way, Hue and Saturation. All of a sudden, you'll see the layer that was added down there called Hue and Saturation. This is something that we can now edit in a non-destructive manner. If we take the saturation down all the way, which will simply take any color out, you'll see how much of a difference there is. So that just completely changed the whole tone of everything. And you can see there was actually some blue coming in. That's because there was a window that's open outside during the daytime. And also kind of just some warmth in it as well from my lighting. So that gets rid of all of that. I kind of like this part, like the saturation, right around there. Not completely desaturated, because it almost looks too fake. So I'm just going to leave the saturation around -67. We can add more though. So for instance, we can take the levels. And by the way, when you add these adjustment layers, you want to make sure that you're only affecting this layer down here. So you're essentially creating a clipping mask out of this by clicking this icon right here. So we'll choose this as well. Otherwise, if these adjustment layers will affect all the layers, and you may not want that. We only want it to select, or to affect this t-shirt layer. So now we can play around with some of these level adjustments. You can see how it will only affect that. That's way too much. But if you want to see a little bit more contrast in the actual shirt, you can drag these sliders around to your heart's desire. All right, I think I like that. All right, so now I'm actually pretty satisfied with it. This is 100% view, so it looks pretty good. I think one more thing I want to do is add a gradient. So to do that, we can go ahead and, let's see here. We'll take our background right here. There we go. And what we can do is, I guess we will add a gradient right there. All right, so now this adds a gradient fill. And we want to choose a preset right here from the second one, which is foreground to transparent. And we're going to change the angle so that the light source is coming from this way, because we have the shadows being pushed up this way. So now we can, if we click on it, we can get the gradient editor up. And this is way too much. So what we can do is take the top color picker and change the change the opacity down just a bit. So what that means now is if we hit OK and the user wants to change the background, maybe to align with their colors, there's always going to be a little bit of a light source right here, which is just an extra thing to make it look nice, I guess. But I'm going to leave it kind of where it was at this desaturated blue, and we'll hit OK. And that is it, guys. So now at this point, you could take this, you could save it as a new PSD file that you can then distribute for others to use. All right, so hopefully you found use out of that. And like I said, if these are really top quality, or you have a ton of them that are also high quality, you can sell them as bundles on different graphic asset websites. You can try to start a service, a website out of it, and rank in Google, learn a little bit of SEO, search engine optimization, and just require an email. So you can build an email list that you can then market to and monetize. So there's a lot of potential here to do a lot of cool different things with these smart templates here in Photoshop. All right, so make sure you subscribe if you enjoyed that, and I'll see you guys real soon. All right, bye.